Yes, my friend, you can completely change your past by changing your perception about it. It is absolutely possible. And so my intention in this video is to share a combination of Neville Goddard's teaching with a combination of Dr. David Hawkins' teaching to show you how revision and recontextualization works and how you can apply it to completely shift your perception about negative traumatic experiences you might have experienced in your childhood upbringing, so that you can use those memories to make them support your vision and purpose in life. I also share with you a vulnerable story from my past that I completely shifted my perception about and the consequences of that to show you how it works and to show you how it looks in practice. And then by the end of the video, I'll show you exactly how you can apply that, how you can change your past to completely shift your perception about it. Because truly, here is what happens. And this happens for a lot of people, including myself from time to time. And everybody, it's like all of us, we have parts of us which are stuck in our past. And we are actually consistently reliving our past in imagination on autopilot. It happens so unconscious to us and so automatic that most of the time we don't know it. Like, we consistently experience circumstances in our life that are reflections of our past, of the perceptions we had about our traumatic past, because we still haven't changed the way we see it. We still haven't changed the meaning we give to our past. And that's the reason why our past influences our present and our present influences our future. So if we are able to change our present, or at least to change our past, forgive me. So if we are able to change our past, or at least the perception of our past, then we can shift our behavior, our attitude in the present. And if we can shift our behavior and attitude in the present, then this will ultimately influence the way we experience our future. That's why revising your past is like the best thing you could do, my friend, if you've embarked on your healing journey and you've started doing the inner work and applying Neville Goddard's teaching. So let's directly get into the video and let's start with how it's actually done. First of all, I want to start with this quote that I want to recite from Neville Goddard. And here is what he says. Your present world reflects the sum total of what you believe to be true about yourself and others. What you're experiencing in the physical world is merely a shadow reflecting the reality of your imaginal activity. Now, your imaginal activity is influenced by your belief systems about yourself and about others. These belief systems about yourself and about others, most of them stem from your childhood experiences, from your upbringing, the beliefs that you have inherited about from your parents, the beliefs that you have automatically assumed from the circumstances you experienced as a child when you didn't know the power of your free will, the power to choose, the meaning you give to events. And so most of the beliefs you have they're running on autopilot because you still haven't revised the meaning you have given to those childhood experiences. And so the truth is, the secret is that if you can change your past, again, this will influence your future. And so, since the feeling is the secret, if you can change the way you feel about your past, again, this will help you commit more to the feeling of the assumptions that you're working with right now by applying the law of assumption in your life. So how it is done practically? Well, let me share with you a story from my life, and through that story, I'll actually I'll illustrate what the practice is, and by the end of the video, I'll show you exactly what are the steps that you need to go through to revise your past. Because revision is something that Neville Goddard speaks a lot about. If you've been reading his books and his work, it's like in a couple of his books, he speaks about this technique. It's so beautiful. And it's not just something you can do. Like, the simplest way to apply revision, by the way, is just to do it every night when you go to sleep and go through the whole of your day, from the moment you go to sleep back to the moment you woke up, backwards. So like trying to remember and revise every single experience, every single circumstance that you have met, that you have experienced in your life. And if you had a negative attitude about it, to revise it from negative to positive. This is something that you can start applying from now, every night if you want. This is something that I've been doing for a while. Not every single night, but I'm doing it like every other night or something. It's such a beautiful process. But now, if we look a little deeper, if we were to change our past, our traumatic experiences from our past, how that is done. So I've had this memory like a couple of years ago when I just realized when I just learned about recontextualization, about this practice and about revision. I've had this memory about growing up in my family, which was, well, I had an abusive, like, let me be a little vulnerable. I had an abusive dad, and like my father was constantly drinking, like he was drinking alcohol a lot, and when he was drunk, he was creating a lot of conflicting experiences with my mother. And so like for 3 to 4 months through the year, it was like a battleground at my home where I grew up, because like he was traveling for 3 to 4 months. This was, or like sometimes 6 months. This was his job. Then when he got back from his job, then the first 2 or 3 months were great because we had a lot of money, like everything was perfectly fine. We were living abundantly. But when the money was starting to lack, when they were running out, so after the initial 2 to 3 months when he got back from work, then he was drinking a lot. This was his way of like repressing his feelings. He was drinking a lot, and he was creating conflicts with my mother like 2 or 3 times per week. So it was like a battleground for 2 or 3 months per year, 2 to 3 times per week. Every other day, he was drinking himself up, and like he was creating conflicts in the house we lived. And so it was a really not a healthy place in which I grew up. And so eventually, when the conflict was high, and like they were not fighting, at least physically, they were fighting verbally. And so when they were fighting, me and my sister were always hiding in our room, and we were just waiting for the storm to pass away in a way. But one time, here is where this story began actually. One time my sister just called me by the hand, like grabbed me by the hand, and she said to me, let's escape. Let's just, like, this is never going to stop. We've been living this for years now, and it's always like that. So let's just run away. Let's escape. And she wanted us to run away from home. And so we started doing that. And like when we were at the front door of our like block, we went down the elevator. We went to the front door, and at this moment I stopped her and just said something to her. What will we do? Like if we run away, if we escape, where we will go? We will be homeless. And we were just little by then. And so it didn't make sense. And I just told her, let's come back and we'll think about something. We'll find a solution to that. And since that moment, I felt responsible to try and stop the conflict. And then I tried, like for the next weeks and months that were passing, I tried whatever I could. Like when they were entering a conflict, my mother and my father, and they decided to enter the room and just stay there and not move until the conflict is over. And I was like, and my father was telling me, who do you think you are? Go back to your room. Don't you see we're talking important matters here? Like, go back to your room. No, like, in my opinion, by consistently experiencing that, I built up the belief that my opinion didn't matter. Like, I didn't deserve to be heard. I wasn't taken seriously. These were some of the beliefs that I inherited from those situations because they were repeating over and over. And so when I decided to actually revise my past, what I did was that I decided to write down on a piece of paper the exact memory of this happening. So they were entering a conflict, like my father was already drunk and he started abusing mentally and verbally my mother, and they were fighting, they were screaming. And so I entered the room in which the conflict was happening, and I just stood there. And my father told me something like, go back to your room. You can't change anything here. Who do you think you are? And so this was the memory of how I experienced it. But in the revision, like on a piece of paper, paper, I wrote the exact memory of how I experienced it. And so on another piece of paper, on the other side of that paper, I wrote down the revision of that memory. So because in the memory, it's a little bit, now that I will share it with you, it's a little bit strange because the memory of what happened actually and of how I revised it, now they're intertwining with one another. So I'm not exactly sure that what I will share with you is exactly the correct version of what happened, because this is the effect of revision. But so going back to the story, on the other piece of, on the first memory, which was the real one, like I've gone back to the room crying and feeling that my opinion was like not valued, it was worthless, nobody cared about it. And I was feeling like a victim, as if I couldn't do anything about that situation. Now, in the other memory that I revised, in the revised memory, I recreated the same experience, but now when I entered the room in which the conflict was happening, I just stood there. And when my father told me, go back to your room, and he was screaming to me, like, your opinion doesn't matter what you're trying to do here, go back to your room. Let us talk our important matters by ourselves. And so I didn't move. I was just like, no, I'm not moving. Unless you stop the conflict, I'm not moving. Nobody likes that. And I basically, in the revised memory, I recreated the scene of what I said to my father. But I was like really, how does this work? I was really stubborn about it. I wasn't moving. And so now I'm not exactly sure, because I'm not exactly sure if this happened for real or if I created that in imagination. So just to tell you that. But so what I did, now I had on one piece of paper, this is the process here. First step, on one piece of paper, write down what is the traumatic memory you want to change. And how is it that happened exactly? Like sequentially, what happened, one thing after the other. Write it exactly as it was and as you remember it and what you believe thanks to it. On the other piece of the paper, write down how you would want it to unfold. And so in my case, in the memory I'm sharing, I wrote down, I stood there and didn't move. I didn't move. I just said, I won't move unless you stop. And so then I started repeating that in imagination, in a meditation. I started meditating on that and I committed to doing it for 21 days. Like, in meditation, I decided to first re-experience all the negative feelings of the memory the way it happened. And then by going through them, I was able to accept and let them go, feel comfortable, feel safe with them. And so in the next phase of the meditation, I experienced the revised memory of what I wanted to do, of how I wanted it to experience. And so like in the revised memory, I didn't move. I didn't go back to my room. I was like, I will stay there until you stop fighting. And so by doing this consistently for 21 days, eventually my imaginal mind came up with this, like it started feeling so real, because first I was recreating the experience of what happened, and secondly, I was recreating the experience of what I would like to happen. I was revising it, and I was doing this sequentially, first and then second, the real memory and then the subjective memory of how I wanted to perceive it. And so eventually by doing that, my imaginal mind entered into this subjective reality in my mind in which I re-experienced the memory, which I didn't know if it happened for real. I can't say for sure, but it felt as real as I was experiencing it. In reality. And so that memory was that I stood there in the storm of that conflict. And I said to my father, I'm not moving, I'm not going away unless you stop fighting. My mom doesn't like it, my sister didn't like it, she wanted us to escape. I'm not tolerating that anymore. And so my father then took me and put me in his lap, and he was like, and he was just, he was continuously saying, who do you think you are? You can't change that, go back to your room. And I was like, no, I won't do it. And so he eventually he tried to slap me by the face, by slapping me. And so this is the moment when I actually defended myself. I put my arm up and I defended myself. And this was the first moment in which he was happy. Like he was, he had this happy expression of on his face, and he validated my feeling of trying to defend myself and of putting my boundaries up. And so this was something so real that I experienced in imagination. And And after that, he was like, because I defended myself, I didn't allow him to swap me. And so I was basically, this experience subjectively, what it created within me was that my opinion mattered, my actions mattered. I could do something to change what I don't tolerate. And so by experiencing this in imagination as if it was real, after that, my whole attitude about my father completely shifted. Then I was able to actually speak my truth and speak my boundaries and my needs. And then I wrote some really vulnerable letters to him. And so eventually, a couple of months passed since I did that process for 21 days. And then I was working with my boundaries. And then eventually, because he was like, there was another situation a couple of months later when he was consistently asking me for money that he used for alcohol and cigarettes, and like I felt guilty if I didn't give them to him, even though I knew he was using them to support his destructive habits, perpetuate his destructive habits. But so eventually, by going through that process of revising this traumatic memory and then connecting to my boundaries, and then in another meditation, I was reliving my experience with my father, of like, again, like some painful emotions through my childhood. And so there was like one night, I was just feeling really sad and I was grieving. I didn't have any clue why. And so I investigated that feeling. I was just able to surrender to it. And so this feeling brought me to the memory of how I chose him as a parent. Like, this was like a beautiful memory that I had beyond my human experience. Like, it was I was communicating with my higher self, and my higher self made me remember this memory of how I chose him as a parent so that I could learn to use my imagination powerfully, and so that I could learn that I could fight inequity in this world, and that my actions actually mattered. And so after that, like, we met, and I was able to speak up my truth, speak up my boundaries in such a way that he finally heard me. And so this was the moment when, before I revised my experiences with my father, and before like having this meditative experience in which I was looking at the grief I was experiencing towards him and all the feelings that I was repressing, and before I remembered how I chose him as my father, I wasn't able to reach him at any way. I was trying to speak to him, but he was never listening. He was never hearing me out. And so eventually, by remembering all of that and revising my past, I wanted to speak up to him, to share my boundaries with him. And I did it in a way in which he heard me out. And so it was a really beautiful moment in which we had together, in which he opened his heart, and like, he cried out, and then we connected for the first time emotionally, because before that he was just using the fact that I was his child so that he could rely on me to, again, support his negative habit, as I told you earlier. But I wasn't tolerating that, because I knew this wasn't in his greatest benefit either. But I wasn't able to do anything. And eventually, by revising this and by going through the grief that I was able to experience and let go of, and connecting to my boundaries, and then synchronistically, like, fate met us again. Like, he needed some help with his computer, but I knew inwardly that this was just a moment in which I needed to speak with him vulnerably all my feelings, genuinely all my feelings. And so I did that. And since that moment, before that, we were enemies. Like, we were always enemies. We never respected each other. We never took each other seriously. We never had emotional connection. But after speaking my boundaries, because now in my imagination I have spoken up, and now I was feeling grateful. And this revision that I was sharing with you earlier, it was the exact thing that needed to happen for me to break that codependent relationship with my father, speak my boundaries, and create some distance between me and him, in which I was able to be my own person, my own individual person, and he was also able to be his own individual person. After that, like, after this time in which I spoke up my truth, my boundaries, since then we had our first emotionally deep connection, and since then we actually decided on some mutual values that we would build our relationship on, and since then we actually started becoming friends. And still, at this stage, still we are not, I don't support his belief systems and he doesn't support mine, but at least we have respect for one another. And at least I was able to take my power back from feeling victimized, because before I revised this memory, I was feeling a victim. I felt as if my opinion didn't matter, as if I couldn't do anything to change the all the inequity and all the unfairness that I meet in life. After I revised that experience, well, this shifted completely, because I saw how my father validated my efforts to fight with unfairness. And because again of his happy reaction, his positive reaction to me fighting back, this was the first moment in which he actually supported me by revising this experience. I mean, and so since then our relationship started completely changing, and of course, like since then, well, this influenced a lot of areas in my life actually. Like since then, I wasn't able to tolerate any more codependency with other people in my life. Narcissists who were in my life, they left, and I was able to speak up my boundaries with them. So a lot of things shifted, but it all started with this revision. So my friend, I'm telling you, it's like, this is what revision is. This is what recontextualization is. Recontextualization ultimately means that you have the absolute freedom to change the context in which you put a memory you have. Because like a while ago, I was reading this psychological research paper. And so inside, some researcher was saying that our memory works in such a way that every time we recall a past memory, we are changing it. Meaning that our memory is subjective. And it is it's associated based on the feelings we experience. So if we feel, let's say, negative and we recall a memory from the past, we will look at it at the worst light. But if we feel positive just about our day and we recall the same memory from our past, we will experience it in a completely different light. We will remember something completely different. And so this is what they were explaining in this research paper, meaning that it is it is scientifically proven that we can completely recontextualize the past that we have experienced. And so if your past makes you feel like a victim in some areas of your life, I highly encourage you, my friend, go back to that past event and completely revise it. Like completely shift the perception you have about it and see what happens. It will completely shift your attitude about yourself, your belief systems about yourself. And like, since what you're experiencing in the physical world is merely a shadow reflecting the reality of your imaginal activity, which your imaginal activity runs on autopilot based on the belief systems that are the automatic response that you had to those traumatic experiences in your past, in your childhood upbringing. When you revise those experiences and you shift your belief systems about them, like I did, like in this example that I gave you, because before I was believing that my opinion didn't matter, nobody cared about me, I couldn't do anything to change the unfairness that I meet in the world. And so by revising this experience, with what I shared happened by doing it for 21 days, well, now I believe, thanks to that experience, that I have the inner power and the inner freedom to not tolerate unfairness. And like, since then, my life completely shifted. Now I'm helping other people do the same thing. And I'm actually seeing how my efforts are having a positive effects on others. Like in this video, for example, maybe this video will inspire you to do something like that. So I tell you, my friend, this works. The past doesn't exist. It only exists in your imagination. You can completely change it. And this is what recontextualization is all about. Putting the traumatic past experience you've experienced in a different context, recontextualizing it, seeing it from a different light. And so now, thanks to all the unfairness that I experienced back in my past and to all the traumatic experiences, well, now I help people heal from their past. So my pain became the remedy I'm giving to the world. So this is how it works. Does it make sense now? I hope it makes sense. I really do believe it makes sense. That being the case, well, I trust you found this video to be helpful. This is how you can do it. Try this process that I explained to you, like writing on a piece of paper the real memory and then the revised memory, and then repeating that scripted what you wrote down in imagination, in meditation for 21 days, and see what happens. See what happens. You completely shift your past. And by doing it, you shift your future. So Yeah, my friend. This was everything I wanted to share in this video. I know it's like a little long, and it was a vulnerable story to share with you, but I wanted it to inspire you. So lastly, if you feel that you need help with doing this inner work and these processes that I share with you about, like I have a coaching program for 3 to 4 months that helps you completely let go of any any traumas you still hold from your past, not tolerate any abusive or manipulative or narcissistic relationship any longer, and surround yourself in those 3 to 4 months with only conscious, uplifting, and meaningful relationships. So if you feel that it's time in your life to do that shift, and if you're really, if you feel that, yeah, if this is important for you, I highly encourage you to check out the training I have, the free training I have of the 3 phases you need to master. These are 3 phases of inner work that you need to master and you need to go through until you experience only conscious, uplifting, and meaningful relationships. And when you do, then you can schedule with me a discovery session in which you can talk personally, one-on-one, on how we can apply those 3 phases personally, specifically in your life, to completely shift your relationships. So if this is something important for you, check out the training, my friend, and I would love to connect on a discovery call. That being the case, thank you so much for watching. I trust you found this video to be helpful. If you're inspired, apply the process I just shared with you. If you found the video to be helpful, like it, comment down below, let me know what's your experience with revision. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe to it. I would love to see you around. Thank you so much for watching. I love you, my friend. Bye-bye for now.